Folks, it's 6:30. It's a little after 6:30. Could everyone find a seat so that we can get started? Okay, folks, if you'll find a seat, we can get started. Oh, okay, okay. Okay, hi. So just... Okay, folks, if everyone could quiet down so that we could get started. Okay, thank you. My name is Kathy Barnard. I'm the chairman of the Wolfboro Planning Board. And thank you all for coming tonight. This is a great turnout. And I want to say a special thanks to all the people who have served on the master plan committees. And you're going to be meeting many of those folks as we begin tonight's program. So basically, what we're here tonight is for the planning board and the planning board subcommittees to share with you what we have done thus far to develop the master plan. And there are a series of tables. Matt Sullivan is going to explain that all to you in a moment. But basically what we're going to want you to do is we want you to take a look at what we've have developed and are proposing thus far. We really want to hear your ideas tonight. You can either write them down, you can tell them to each committee table verbally if you're comfortable doing that. But the purpose is to get as many ideas and as much input as possible as we further develop the plan. So this is not the only opportunity you're going to have for input, but after tonight, this information will all go back to the various committees. They will then work on a final draft version of each chapter. When those are completed, there then will be another public input and public hearing, an opportunity for people to comment on the final version of the master plan. So this is kind of a process. It's a slow process, but we're trying to get as many ideas and a complete picture of what people want Wolfboro to look like in the next 10 years and on into the future. So what we're going to do now is Matt Sullivan, the planning director, is going to go through the format for tonight. And so I'll turn this over to Matt.
Thank you, Kathy. As many of you who have been to these events before have seen, Kathy has pretty successfully covered all the ground that I need to cover. This event is a little different than the last event many of you may have attended that was a master plan update forum just a couple months ago. Our last event was really focused on formal presentations to the public to update you. Tonight is all about your input and getting the input on the goals, recommendations, and the purpose statements that these groups have drafted to date. Before I jump into this for just a minute, these committees have been working for about 3 to 4 months, and I hope that, like me, you're going to be shocked and awed by the amount of work that's really gone into this. And I'll say now, before I forget as well, that these committees have actually had between 50 and 55 meetings. I did the tally today. It's been an incredible group of citizen engagees that are really doing a wonderful job on this plan. So like Kathy did, I'd like to thank everyone who's been participating thus far. So our agenda tonight, I'll do a brief introduction, and then we're going to have these committee breakout sessions. You'll see that you're generally organized into 6 different tables. Thankfully, we have a good problem tonight, is that we have a lot of people in attendance, so please sort of force your way into a group if you need to. These tables are structured around the different chapters that we've set up. Some of these chapter groups are actually covering multiple chapters as well. You'll have 10 to 15 minutes at each of the tables, and a couple things will happen. There'll be a facilitator at your group. Typically, it's the chair of the committee that's working on that chapter, and they're going to present sort of what the committee has been working on. They'll present their purpose statements. They'll present some goals or some ideas that they're thinking about, and in some cases, they'll actually get into specific recommendations that they developed. That should last only a couple minutes, and then the next amount of time is really dedicated to collecting your input and feedback on that content that they're going to review. You'll see we have these printouts. Those will be moved to in front of your table so you can see the purpose statement, goals, and some of those recommendations. Additionally, you'll see on the table we have some printouts as well. You're welcome to take those home. They have a date on them that's very specific. This really represents our body of work as of tonight's meeting. But please, feel free, take those home. If you have any specific comments, I'd welcome you to reach out to me directly, and I'll have my contact information up here in just a second. We want to remember that each of you should visit all 6 tables tonight, with the exception of the folks facilitating. So you're starting at one table right now. You're not locked into remaining at that table. We'd like you to actually go to each of the tables and provide your input as we go along. And again, we're going to do 6 10 to 15-minute sessions throughout the night. But let me start off with some general information, because I do see a few new faces in the audience. I wanted to cover what it is that we're doing here. And our master plan is really a critical document for setting policy for the community over the next 10-year period. Our most recent master plan was done in 2007. Some of you may have heard me talk about it prior sessions. We had an incredible amount of implementation work done as part of that 2007 plan. The idea is that the 2018-2019 plan will do the same, that a lot of the projects you see in the community over the next 10 years will be the direct result of the recommendations that you see coming out of this master plan. I should note as well that many master plans across the state of New Hampshire are focused exclusively on land use. And that limits it in a lot of ways. But you'll see a lot of the goals and recommendations tonight that you look at go beyond land use. They go to different organizational goals. They go to partnerships. We really try to have a broad scope here in town because we recognize this master plan as perhaps the most critical policy document we have as a community. So a master plan does a couple things. It looks at what the community looks like today, what we see happening as far as trends in the community as well today, what we think will happen in the future. In some cases, we have very specific projections that drive our thinking about the future. What is our vision for the future? That's almost maybe the most important thing that comes out of this plan. What do we want the future of Wolfboro to look like? That's really, really important. And then specifically, how do we actually go about getting there? And that's where our goals and recommendation statements actually come into this. We view these recommendations that come out of the plan as our sort of means to an end when it comes to that vision that we identify as part of this process. The 6 committees, as I quickly review them here, we have the Housing, Population, and Economic Development Group, which is going to be that table over there to start off. Natural Resources, which is right here. Energy is right here. This is actually a new chapter for this process. Transportation and Public Infrastructure is back there. Arts and Heritage is over here in the corner. And Community Facilities is in the back corner over there. So those are our 6 chapter subcommittees. And you'll see that some of these subcommittees have a pretty sizable scope. Transportation and Public Infrastructure, a very, very big topic. housing, population, and economic development, a lot of big issues there as well. But the idea is that these committees, as they're structured here, will hopefully have an integration between the different chapters that they're working on. So just to update you where we're at, we've reviewed a lot of data and analysis at the committees. We started to identify goals, but we're really at this identifying recommendations and action steps, and that's why you'll see a lot of the printouts and the materials handed out around the tables this evening. That's really where we are in the process. We have these 2 steps left at the end to revise and refine the chapter based on public input that we continue to solicit and collect. And then we'll ultimately, hopefully, recommend these chapters to the planning board. The planning board is ultimately responsible for adopting this document at the end of the process, and we hope to do that in early 2019. Just to give you an idea of our schedule, highlighted in red, we're in August. We're right on schedule, which is pretty unbelievable to me. But again, it's all because of the hard work that's been done by these subcommittees to really chug away at this content as we go along. So I'm very thankful for keeping us on track throughout. This is the last thing I'm going to go through. It's going to be a bit challenging, a little monotonous. You'll see these purpose statements around the room, but I wanted to quickly present all of them one after another to each of you to save our subcommittee facilitators a bit of time, but to also just sort of allow you to compare them right next to each other. So I'm going to start with natural resources right up here in the front. And their purpose statement for the chapter is the abundance of natural resources plays a major role in the quality of life in Wolfboro. Both residents and visitors appreciate and enjoy the natural beauty and recreational opportunities provided by these resources. It is therefore imperative that these natural resources are preserved for all to enjoy. So that's natural resources up front. Economic development, a bit longer. Town's economic development policies must consider the importance of the greater downtown area as a center for economic, civic, cultural, and tourism activities, while equally considering the high value placed on protecting the area's natural resources, natural, physical, and historic resources, as well as the pedestrian nature of the area. Encouraging the expansion of existing businesses to support infill development that would meet this purpose is important. And the opportunities for more economic growth with year-round employment, such as health service-related businesses, educational institutions, light industry, and other businesses should be considered in identifiable developable areas. Energy, our new chapter over here, the Wolfboro Energy chapter for 2019 to 2029 provides a blueprint for a forward-looking energy future that takes changing technology and best energy practices into account as the town's economy, environmental conditions, and energy needs evolve. It offers a path to ensure a reliable and efficient energy supply while striving to reduce costs. Public infrastructure in the back. Town strives to design, build, and maintain the best infrastructure possible. Pretty strong statement there. It will commit to finding fiscally and environmentally responsible ways to manage its infrastructure, always mindful that it has a direct effect on our lakes, economy, and the character of Wolfboro. The town must develop and implement proactive asset management planning, which you'll probably hear about throughout the evening tonight, and capital reserve funding strategies in order to ensure its infrastructure remains dependable and innovative, actually. Arts and heritage in the back corner. Our purpose in writing this chapter is to establish arts, culture, and heritage priorities for the town and to provide guidance to departments, other boards and commissions, and community organizations who can work together to accomplish these goals. This is a document that should reflect our unique and cherished history, heritage, and the power of all arts to humanize. It should acknowledge the influence of 21st century life, ideas, and technology, and offer a roadmap to integrate the past and present. Our intention is to enhance the positive impacts of arts, culture, and heritage, both town-wide and on a regional level, to strengthen our community and enhance its economic viability. And lastly, over at community facilities, short but very to the point, our vision for Wolfboro for the coming decade is a town with the right number of well-maintained facilities to provide the level of service required by its residents and ratepayers. So that's just a little context for how these different committees are actually comparing to each other at this point in the process. You're also going to see quite a bit tonight that we have subcommittee members at the different tables that are listening in. We want to make sure that these chapters are consistent and not contradicting each other with their goals and recommendations. That's a big focus of tonight's event and the work that will come after this as well. With that, I'm going to stop talking because I do enough of that, and I'm actually going to start us off on our breakout groups. I mentioned the committees. Kathy Barnard is over here in the corner. She's standing up, obviously, introduced herself. Peter Goodwin is at Natural Resources over here in the front. Vaughn Dugan's back at Arts and Heritage. Brad Harriman's at Public Infrastructure. Paul O'Brien over here in the corner for Energy. And Paul Whalen is in the back for Community Facilities. Those will be the facilitators for tonight's event. With that, general input on the chapters, questions on the purpose statements, the goals, recommendations, questions, concerns, anything you'd like to ask these facilitators, tonight is the time to do it. With that, I'm going to pass it off to them. We look forward to collecting your input, and please let me know if you have any bigger questions that I can answer, and come find me as I sort of walk around the room and listen to our feedback. Yep. Yes, I will alert you when the 10 to 15 minute, likely on the 15-minute side, is up. So I'll actually get on the microphone and I'll say, please move around. You don't have to move around in a clockwise or counterclockwise format. You can move wherever you'd like. The only thing I would emphasize is that as we obviously have a large group here, as best we can balance the tables. That's probably the best way to move forward. But again, hopefully you visit all 6 of the tables this evening. Okay? All right, thank you very much, folks. Appreciate it.
More work that should be done, and we think you as taxpayers ought to be mindful and aware of the fact that, you know, we should be paying attention to this and doing the best we can to keep our costs down as we go forward. I will mention briefly, there's one thing that that is pretty noteworthy. How many of you have been paying attention to the library project? How many of you think it's a great idea? You think it's a great idea? Cindy, you think it's a great idea, right? The Wolfboro Library project all by itself, that little teeny weeny library, is doing something from the policy point of view and from an operating point of view that is extremely provocative in the energy world. They are disrupting at the edge. They're doing extremely disruptive things. What they're trying to do is they're trying to create an environment in the library where the amount of energy that they consume as a result of conservation ideas and tightening up the building, but the amount they consume, they will produce. So in effect, it's a net zero building. 5-10 years ago, you would have carted us all out of here and thought we were drunk if we had ever advanced the idea of net zero. Hanover is moving towards becoming a net zero town. A library over in the western part of the state is moving towards becoming a net zero library. The technology and the will is there to do it, and we think it's time for us to plan around those types of things, and that's why we think it's low-hanging fruit. Our energy statement, and this is a draft. Pencils are not down on our purpose statement, so I'm going to kind of refer to this. What we're basically saying is, what we need to do is we need to find a way to find the best technologies that are out there, make sure that our policies are put into place, and then try to bring those together for the benefit of the community. We're going to go on a field trip in a couple of weeks. We're going down to Massachusetts. There's a small municipal electric company down in Massachusetts that's beginning to do things around energy storage, municipal-sized energy storage, putting big batteries out there to store energy. And you say, why would you want to do that? Well, in a couple of years, we're going to get a little reminder from Eversource, our energy electric company. They're going to start wanting to charge us for peak demand energy. And what the little municipal down there is saying is, we don't want to pay peak prices. We'd much rather invest that in ourselves. We'd much rather think differently about how we use energy, and in doing so, shave the tops off the peaks and keep their electric bills from growing kind of in a nominal way. So we're looking at those types of things. We think that right now, as we look inside of the town, a few years ago there was a grant that came across from the federal government for us to go out and look at energy inside of our town. We know, generally speaking, what we spend for transportation fuel. We know what we spend for electricity. We know what we spend for diesel on a per building basis. We know what's going on. Right now, we're spending more money on energy than the rate of inflation. So our energy spend is going up faster than the rate of inflation. Does that mean we're bad people? No. It means that we have transportation fuels. We got to put diesel in the trucks. We got to plow the roads. We got police that have cars they have to keep going. So we do have these things that are pushing up on our energy prices. Any town that hasn't engaged in conservation or hasn't figured out how to bend that curve has the same problem we do. So yeah, we're not alone in this one. So we're spending greater than the rate of inflation. We see the trend is going to move to be, even upward and a higher pressure. Our objective is to find ways to bend the curve, is to get that down a little bit. So we're going to come up with some ideas, at least initially, that may sound a little provocative, but those are ideas that you're going to have to ultimately vote on. We're not going to impose these on you. You're going to have to ultimately vote on. And again, we're going to keep reflecting on our little library, that little engine that could. They are doing things from a policy point of view and from a net metering point of view that is pretty novel. So I'll move into what we call goal discussions, and I'm gonna leave that there. Not so much to talk about it, but this group has put together over 3 pages of what I'd call goal ideas. They're not goals. And what we did is we put them into different buckets. We put them into buckets that say things like administratively. What are the things we should be thinking about administratively? Number 1 is every year we should have something in our town's annual report that says how much energy did we use last year versus the year before. Wouldn't you like a 1-pager in your annual report that says that? Of course you would. I think you would. Number 2, we have an energy plan that was very prescriptive 5 years ago. It was extremely detailed. It said exactly, what departments should think about doing. We ought to kind of blow the dust off this thing and go back out to the departments and say, put this into your budgets. We want to see positive contributions inside of your budgets, because this was all about changing the way we think and changing the way we operate, which is 2 very important things. So there's a prescription right here to do things. We're going to recommend, I think, through our goals, keep this thing going. We're going to set a target. We may never get there. We're going to set a target of trying to get our town to go to zero net energy in 10, 20, 30, pick a number. We're going to set a target. It's not so much to punish us if we don't get there. It's to cause us to just think differently about the way in which we take out our trash, the way in which we recycle, the way in which we do things. Anything we can do to take a little nick out of energy usage, we want to get all over that. As long as we're not being so intrusive in your life that we're kind of telling you how you should behave. We're probably not going down that track. We want to talk about updating our building codes potentially. If somebody comes into town and wants to put up a new building, do we want to help them learn about things like LEED, low energy and emissions, design and construction? Do we want to have some resources available to them so that they can potentially get their hands around some grants? There's a lot of money out there. We haven't taken advantage of that. That's not a bad statement, it's just a what is. But there's a lot of grant money that will come because the power companies are actually passing out grant money because they don't want to go build new power plants. Because they don't want to come into this town and have a conversation about siting a big smoky power plant. They'd much rather pay to have people conserve and pay to have people tighten up their buildings, employ different technologies. And if we can grab some of that low-hanging fruit and make that available to people who want to do things inside of for their buildings, whether it be commercial or residential, we should do that. We have, some questions about what's the role of the municipal electric company going forward. Right now, we have an incredibly good municipal electric company. But here's what they do. They take energy in from a source that they can't control, and they distribute it. That's all they do. They don't generate anything. They don't store anything. Now, we need to make sure, and by the way, they deliver energy to us at 99.94% of the time. I know that some of us are sitting on the outer edge of the town where our power may not be as reliable, but on average, 99.94% of the time, the power company is sending us electricity. So we need to make sure that that stays high, the reliability is high, because at the end of the day, we can't afford, for safety purposes and for all kinds of reasons, you can't afford to let that thing fail. So we need to continue to look at the investments that I call him Barry, that's the guy who runs the power company. We need to make sure we keep Barry, going along, but every year he's going to have to come before you, and he's going to have to show you what he wants to spend, and you should ask the questions. Is that going to get us better? If so, how? Before I cast my vote at the warrant article for you. In fact, there is. There's restrictions on how much we can generate, and there's restrictions on how much. Are you guys familiar with net metering? Net metering is when you put up solar panels and you feed power into the meter goes backwards. And there's a restriction on how much you can actually send into to the power company. It's imposed on our municipal electric by Eversource. So this little library is breaking the rules. This little library potentially is going to send more power into Wolfboro Electric than he's allowed to take. And that's a rule breaker. But you know what? We all kind of sit around and go, let's do it. Let's push. So yes, there is a restriction on how much we can generate. Now, can we? No, it's a contract restriction we have with the power company, with the power providers. But like anything, contracts are things we discuss and negotiate. And when it comes time for us to have those conversations, we can do that. I'll be honest with you, we're a long way from having those kinds of hard conversations. I'll give you some facts. There's only 35 homes, I think 35 homes in the entire town that have solar panels. Not a lot. We've got a long way to go, all right? So we're going to have some conversations about net metering, construction. How many charging stations do we have in our town? 2. I got 2. That probably doesn't cut it, all right? Maybe it does, but if you got people with driving electric cars, if they don't live here, they're not going to come here unless they can charge their car. So you have to think about it. My favorite subject is what I call vehicle storage. Where do we put these 2.5-ton things that sit in traffic and just send out smoke? traffic is bad for business because they haven't parked their car so they can spend money at the Yum Yum shop or at bootleggers, and it's also bad for our environment because they're sitting out there just. So we may have some thoughts on that. This is internal stuff. We're starting to see it. We're pushing that every department needs to step up and be positive about what they're going to do in energy. And then this one-page annual review. And then the other part we're talking about is, how do we get other people to help us fund this stuff? This shouldn't be on taxpayer nickels. There's other things going on. So that's a brief thumbnail. There's another couple of pages of stuff that we're going to ultimately turn into goals, and we will refine this a little bit more, and we will meet Mr. Matt's aggressive deadline. So with that, questions, comments, anything I can do?
All right, folks, we're coming up on 15 minutes. If you want to sort of wrap up the thoughts you're getting out right now and think about moving on to the next table. Again, there's no structure as to where you need to go, but if you could just wrap up and plan to head on to the next table right now. Folks, please try to move to a table. Obviously, hearing in this room is a little challenging, so the more side conversations that are going on makes it more challenging to hear. So please move to a table if you haven't already done so. Thank you.
Associated with the Natural Resources Inventory, and that was done in 2011. And in that inventory, there were a number of recommendations, and those recommendations we looked at them all. We also looked at all the parts of the Natural Resources Inventory. Natural resources. And so we ended up having that discussion as we go through. There were the minutes taken of what people's comments were. I then ended up merging the comments, the recommendations, and the input from the town forum, which occurred last year, with the input which people gave. And some of the input was not particularly related to what we were doing, but the input was appreciated. Right here, we end up having some pieces of paper that you can end up adding things to and make your suggestions, and it would be greatly appreciated if you do. The idea is that we have a draft document. We don't have a finished document. And basically what we're trying to do is to set the goals for what we would like to have in the way of natural resources in 10 years from now. And as the purpose statement says, we have lots of really nice stuff we'd like to keep, and how do we keep that? We're interested in the water quality. We're interested in our what we see out there when we're on the lakes, that we don't want to see perhaps what is down toward Laconia. If you look up from Winnipesaukee, where the whole hillside's covered with stuff, and we'd like to try to keep our property the way it is. There are also some issues associated with such things as the increase in use of our natural resources, as in Albee Beach seems to have an increased amount of use, and how do we end up dealing with that? It is something that is not going to be an easy solution. It is something that the select board is going to have to deal with. And the thing that you do have to realize about the master plan is that it is the goals, it is not specific things. In other words, we don't end up saying we want to get rid of this particular thing or that particular thing, or we want to get this particular company in here. We're looking for goals, and we're trying not to be specific, because if someone in the last group ended up talking about the Allen A and what its future was, if we specifically said something about the Allen A, then you get the Allen B coming in somewhere else in town, and you couldn't deal with it. So we try to keep our statements reasonably general. But our purpose is to try to maintain our water quality and the natural resources that people enjoy, because people come to Wolfboro because they like our natural resources. The committee that I was working with had people who were sort of saying, don't put too many regulations on us. And there was the other side, which was saying we need to make sure we regulate everything so that we are protected from everything. And I think that we ended up coming out with things which were relatively in the middle, so that people were pretty happy with our end result, and the whole committee voted to send all this stuff to you. This stuff is all available online. If you want to look at it, that's fine. If you want to take some home, that's fine. I voted against printing 500 copies because I didn't want to kill all the trees. So that's where we are. Are there questions?
How are you working with the arts and culture group on the scenic aspect of things?
We are not working directly with that group. The question was, are we working with the arts and culture group? And we are not working with that group in particular, but we are very concerned about the scenic viewscapes. We're concerned about perhaps what goes on along the shorelines, as in, we don't want to have three-story boathouses that are sitting there on the lake. And so therefore, at the same time, there are some very good-looking boathouses, and the alternative to a boathouse ends up being a breakwater, and there are some rather ugly breakwaters around here. So, we aren't trying to regulate things, but we'd like to try to keep the character similar to what we have. Yeah?
The bigger scale. So, is there a plan to work in concert with when you look around the view line, the Envision or the watershed or
There is a recommendation that we work locally with the nonprofits who are working in our area, such as the Wentworth Watershed Association. There is the idea that we would also work with other towns that are part of the view that we see, as in Cobble Crown and a lot of these places, a lot of the things we see are outside of Wolfboro. And there is also the idea that we would work with regional nonprofits who are trying to protect things, as in the Moose Mountain group is doing wonderful things. And but we also end up finding that there's now a developing motion for the Winnipesaukee watershed, and so we are working in trying to get coordination so that we're not just working by ourselves, we're working with others. And I mean, some of our nonprofits are helping out with that. The Wentworth Watershed Association recently ended up getting an easement on a large piece of property which is actually in the next town over at Warren Brook, and that is a useful thing to have happen. So we're trying to suggest that we need to work locally, we need to work regionally, and we need to make sure we work with the other towns.
I've asked about this before several times. Where it says consider regulations related to people pumping water from our lakes or things like selling to. Can we add the whole company that sucks water out to go charge people water?
If we mention them in the master plan. Right, it's the swimming pool people is what we're after. It's they're pumping stuff out to fill swimming pools, and right, and in fact, the Kingswood Golf Club ends up pumping water out to water their fairways, and they've been doing that ever since Kingswood Golf put in irrigation. And at the same time, the amount of water that they take out is very, very small compared to the amount of water which might be taken out of Willie Brook by a guy who puts his hose over the edge of the bridge. But
Anybody that profits from drawing water, because my concern with the water quality and all that is there's can't make more water, and how will it do the town and development and business and all that? We're all drawing from the same cup. I'm concerned that we're looking at surface water, we're not looking at
the aquifers which we have in town are mapped. At the same time, they haven't been mapped by doing drill holes. The question is, what about our aquifers? What goes on there? They haven't been drilled to see what's really down there. And in fact, the nursing home which was at an issue up by the 7-Eleven. It turns out that they end up then going and drilling their well to see if they have enough water, and they didn't have enough water, so they bagged their plan. And at the same time, that particular area is on one of our, quote, prime aquifers. There is water there. It has to do with how fast you can get that water out. It also then has to do with how you can get rid of your wastewater, because your wastewater is an issue. And, so how do you end up dealing with that? So yes, there's recommendations which we have to, make sure that our aquifers are protected and update the number of oil well or the oil storage tanks which we end up having, and any other hazardous waste sites. And it turns out that some of that information is pretty old, but so it needs to be updated. So we are worried about our aquifers and what comes in. And the watershed plans which we end up having with the Lake Wentworth Association or the Lake Wentworth Foundation did a watershed plan. That is an important part of what we're saying should be done. And it turns out that Rust Pond ends up having a watershed plan, but the idea is we'd like to have it for all of Wolfboro. And the small drainages, especially the ones that go straight down into Winnipesaukee, are basically not being looked at, and we need to get those updated.
That's one of the concerns that come up several times, especially having signs of some sort put on the drains downtown, letting people know that those storm drains go straight into the lake.
Yep.
I don't even know. We keep saying it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Is that part of this rule for stencil drains to the lake? Could have done it on a weekend for like some good. I was shocked when I learned whenever they go down that lake, it ends up in.
Yep. It goes right there.
And I learned that 2 years ago. And here we sit.
Well, there's a small rain garden here. And supposedly it's designed so that the water from the parking lot, some of it goes down into the rain garden. So, but these are issues that we're dealing with. And if you went to Mass Landing on Crescent Lake, they have done a reasonably good job of trying to deal with that kind of erosion, which goes right into the lake system.
Okay, folks, it's been another 15 minutes, believe it or not. I want to encourage you to move on to a new table. I do want to also add that on the tables you'll see comment cards. If you'd like to leave a comment for a specific committee, please feel free to do so. Just another way to provide input, but please move on to the next table. Thank you.
Started here, folks. I'll give you a quick little thing of where we're at with this committee. We're one of the newer committees that started meeting, so we haven't gotten through a lot of our data yet. We've pretty much done our work on the water and sewer department, water and sewer system, the distribution system, you know, the pipes and stuff like that. If you look at the bottom of the sheet there in front of you, you'll see we still have the docks, the drainage, broadband, parking lots, sidewalks, and the road system to talk about it, to build into our master plan. So we have a long way to go still. When you saw Matt's graph up there, when these reports are all due to the planning board, we're definitely going to be at the tail end of each of those projected dates. So no, electric's going to be under the energy committee. Yep. Even though we're going to talk about broadband a little bit, because we had a member join our committee that's very up to date on that and explaining to us how that will work. That's going to actually sit on top of all the telephone poles. It's going to change the way that we watch TV and, you know, get on the internet and stuff. So that's the technology there is just changing as we speak. So, yep.
What exactly are they doing under Center Street? What is that ongoing?
Okay, the question is, what are they actually doing under Center Street? They've been redoing all of the water, the sewer lines in that area, and also the drainage work updates in that area, because that's, as you guys know, when that rains in downtown there, that's kind of a low point, and that whole area just floods, especially over by the liquor store, the Clark Plaza area there. So they've really done a lot of improvements on there. During the summer now, they're actually redoing the water lines on Lena Street. They finished. They're doing Pine Street now. The water line they're replacing on Pine Street, the original line there was built in 1898, to give you an idea how old it is. Yeah, no, it's not wood. I have seen some wood pipes in the town before, so so those kind of upgrades are happening all the time and stuff. So, yep. Yeah, the docks have been. We have a capital reserve account that we started this past year. We're going to add to it next year. We're hoping to actually be ready to present a warrant article for the expansion next year. It's going to go through our capital improvement process, get through then come to the selectmen for priorities, and then we present those warrant articles to the budget committee before they go to the town for vote. So it's quite a process to get through on that. The design is being done now as we speak for the expansion of them. What it'll do, it'll add 24 dock spaces for what they call probably a 24-foot boat. So there'll be 24 of those available in addition to what's already there. Each dock will be, I think all but one dock will be expanded out to certain lengths. Some of them might be 40 feet, extended straight out, yep. And they're also going to realign with the mount, the way the mount comes in. That's going to be more straight in and out rather than on the angle that it is now. So they can get the other docks to go up beyond it. The mount will change its angle, yep. That's what they use it for design. Yep. Well, we have to present it, get the design done, get the costs on it, then we present it to the town. Like I said, we want to try. I think the idea is to try and present it this winter, for this March town meeting to be voted on. Then it could happen in the next year or so. But it might be the year. Depends what other capital projects come in, because we do try and not impact the tax rate so much to all of a sudden, you know, have one year be $5 million higher than another year, so the tax rate doesn't, you know, do that up and down. Correct. That's a separate one there. The parking lot is a separate issue from the docks, yeah. And we've actually permitted and funded the repairs to what they call the retaining wall along by the docks, out around dockside, and also back up the river to the bridge. That's all kind of deteriorating and falling apart. So that's all going to be done this year and next year, I would say. They're going to start heavy on that this fall. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah, all that has to get permitted through DES. Yep. Okay. Anything at all is an open game, so. No, that's a good question. Here on TV there, you asked how the town is doing on its road maintenance and rebuilding compared to the state 10-year plan. The town's actually doing very well. Dave Ford has done a great job of putting basically a 10-year plan out on our road system, what it would cost to rebuild the roads need to be rebuilt, and the cycle life of them before you have to go back to redo them again. And we're on a budget schedule to maintain, to get up to that number that we need to rebuild. So by the time these roads need to be redone again, the other ones are already done. So we'll be cycling around. Now also what's kind of important on that is that when you go through and rebuild these roads, like say Center Street's actually a state road they're redoing, once the base work is all done, then when you go back to redo them again, you're not going into the base and doing all that expensive work, and you're just talking the surface conditioning, whether it's shimming and overlaying, crack sealing, stuff like that, or chip sealing on them. So your costs, your dollar costs will go a lot further in the future once these roads are rebuilt. So pavement has a life of probably 20 years on it, and I've seen charts, and I try and go by this where I work, is that about every 7 years they need to be addressed as far as the surface itself goes. You either need to get a chip seal on it, or if you do a chip seal or sand seal every 7 years, you'll maintain that level of road to a good to excellent condition. Whereas if you let it go for 12 to 15 years, it drops off drastically, and then it's costing you probably $4 to repair what that $1 would have kept you at a higher level at. Right, yep.
Is there a way to find out where a certain street is on the cycle of maintenance as far as being resurfaced?
Yeah, he has Public Works has a spreadsheet with all the anticipated dates for the roads to be reconstructed and when they need to be resurfaced, and how much of a rebuild needs to be done, whether it's whether it's just a chip seal or sand seal on it, or just a shim and overlay, or a full, what they call box out reconstruction, which is digging down, the 2 or 3 feet, put all new gravels in. So, these are just the residential streets that we talk about anyway here, because we don't really have any say on the state roads, other than the fact that we are participating in the Center Street. We're paying a third of that cost because that moved it up on this plan to get it done for us. So.
What is that addressing? I was just going to ask. What was Center Street?
Safety was a big thing, because it's going to be relocating where Dunkin' Donuts is. The road's actually going to get shifted 7 feet over closer to Dunkin' Donuts. So when you're coming out of Lana Street, you have the red building on your right there now, and you can't see up around the corner. You're going to be out there 7 more feet, so you'll be able to actually see a lot better. It's going to drastically improve all the drainage down there, because as you know, when you get these heavy rains, Clark Plaza floods out, very bad. So all the drainage pipes and catch basins have all been upgraded to all new condition. Water and sewers water was done about 10, probably 15 years ago. Anyway, that was in good shape in Center Street. Sewer lines have been redone. The catch basins have been redone to eliminate our inflow and infiltration, which is the groundwater getting into our sewer system. And then we have to treat that water and dispose of it too, which costs a lot. Yes, sidewalks are going to be redone at the same time too. It's going to look 100% better.
It is so horrible.
Yeah, it is. It's going to have all new curbing and no sidewalks. It's going to be very nice when it's done. Yeah, the plan is they're going to hit it hard right after Labor Day. So September and October, avoid the area if you can. Hear that on TV? You want to? Businesses will always be open throughout the whole area there. You can always have access to all the businesses. Thank you. Yes.
Just when you do work on drainage, I think it's really important to recognize that we're expecting more intense and frequent storms with lots more water in them. And so we plan on that.
Yeah. Definitely. The engineers that work on this all take that into account, the types of storms we're getting now. They have 25-year storms, 50, 100-year storms, and those are all changing, as we all know now. So that's all being built in. Yeah. We're getting, instead of that inch of rain in a 12-hour period, we'll get an inch and a half in 3 hours. So, yeah.
What about bridges in town?
Yep. Those are definitely all going to be part of the road infrastructure system. The question was about bridges. Those are going to be evaluated. The state right now has a program. They inspect every bridge, whether it's a state bridge or a town-owned bridge, every 2 years. Then if a bridge is red listed, which means that it's in deteriorating condition, they will inspect that bridge every year, and they provide the reports to the town. We have one right now that's scheduled to be redone. I think it's next year, is going to be the Pleasant Valley Road Bridge down by the Heath there and stuff, down in that area there. That's going to be a major project because we don't have any detours. We have to put a temporary crossing in there. So. Yeah, Middleton Road, we actually own that now. We took ownership of it, so. I don't think there's any, in Wolfboro, I don't think there's any other, that's called an unnumbered state road. I think that was the only one we had here. I'm trying to think off the top of my head now if there's any. I don't think there's any other ones in town, so. Yeah, right, yeah. So that's the only one that would be involved in, yes.
So we keep hearing a couple of rumors that they're going to stop seasonal town water to the seasonal residences. Is that a valid rumor or is it not?
No, that's not really a valid rumor. I'd say we're under suggestions, I would say, by DES to do something about our seasonal lines. And what they prefer is that we actually just bury them, even if it's only a foot deep. The town doesn't have any plans that I know of. We're not suggesting anything as far as the selectmen go of doing away with any of the seasonal water lines at all. If anything, we'd probably upgrade them, bury them a foot or so that they're a little more protected from. I think what they're worried about is they're exposed on top of the ground to anything can happen to them and stuff. They get them protected more, then it's safer for you guys that are on it and stuff like that. So, yep.
Where are there seasonal?
We have them out on Oakwood Road. We have them down on Hopewell Point.
Key Waden Road.
Yep. There's quite a few of them around, more than you think. Yeah. Yep. Yep.
I mean, we just put in a well last year, but our whole area is all seasonal water. Unless you drill a well, it's seasonal.
Right. Pardon?
Oh, thank God for Gabriel
Oh, yeah.
finally getting done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely on our list, and we're happy to have that done, yes. Yeah. Yeah. That is if you have the mains coming down, if you have a leak in them. If there's any type of leakage before it goes through your meter, any water that goes through your meter obviously is billed to the homeowner. Unaccounted for water is water that we meter as it goes out of the treatment plant up there by Beach Pond. We know how many gallons a day go out there, and we know how many gallons per day go through each of the houses all totaled up. So that difference is the unaccounted for water. So just these numbers aren't accurate. Just for round numbers, say if we pump out 300,000 gallons of water, we treat and send out through the meter at the plant, but only 250,000 get billed out. Unaccounted for water at one point. I think we're down in the 25%. Well, ideally, I'd like to get it down to like 15 or lower is what we're shooting for. Yeah, that's a lot of water, but yep.
It's funny though, even the water guy
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I know like Municipal want to provide a cost-effective sewage system. It would be great if you also were thinking about energy too, so a cost-effective and energy-efficient sewage system.
Which one are you on now?
Sewer goal 1.
Sewer Gold, right?
Provide a cost-effective and
Okay, folks, I'm being told by my
Yep.
bosses here
Yep.
to
No, we
move
can,
everybody along. So it's been 15 minutes. If you could move
I think
on
we're
to the
kind of-
next table.
We're kind of
I do just have one quick question, though.
We can definitely add
How many
that
folks
into
in the
it,
room
you know.
are not year-round residents? I'm just curious, as a poll, not year-round residents. Okay, well, thank you, folks, for being here. We really appreciate it. Your input is very, very
Okay,
important in
thank
this
you.
process. But if you'd like to move on to the next table, please do so at this time.
So that's a very, very quick, because one of the things we're looking for tonight is to get your feedback. So that's a very, very quick kind of snapshot of where we are right now. So I want to kind of start the conversation out by asking if any of you have any comments. And also I should point out John is our scribe tonight, so anything we talk about verbally, again, it's hard to hear in here, but he will get down for us. There's also comment cards on the table. You're welcome to leave. The third is to email or get in touch with Matt or Kathy for feedback at any time. So with that, any comments that you see anything we've missed, that we've got wrong, that you want to add, that you want to take away? It's like,
Probably everyone wants, but when you put some of these new buildings into place or you renovate the library, every time the town does something like that, they have an opportunity to do something that is architecturally in keeping with the town. The new library, I go to the library all the time. I love the library. But it would have been so easy to create a face from the road that looks more like the beautiful historic buildings we have here, still keep it energy efficient. It's not terrible, but it's not, it doesn't add value in any way to what this town is and what sells this town. And I would love, like, when you get it, think about that. Think about every time the town invests money in those resources, they can also invest in architectural beauty.
yeah, so the comment, because again it's very hard to hear in here, is as these buildings get upgraded or rebuilt or built, that the architectural tie-in with the town be maintained. And some of these committees cross a little bit. So there's also, you know, the and that's why you're here tonight, right? So certainly, you know, the arts and heritage are also be interested in hearing that comment. We certainly are interested in hearing that comment. So believe it or not, and this surprises many, many people, is that so the question was on the demographic trends. And believe it or not, the projection for Wolfboro is for it to stay very flat in its population. Maybe very, very small growth, but certainly an aging population. And I don't, off the top of my head, have the exact stats of where we are. I know Matt certainly does. But so very, very steady population, but certainly an aging community. I'm sorry, you had a question?
I'm pro-development cases, but in my 14 years I've watched this building or the hospital or the school, they all come out with a lot of self-purposes to do the expansion, and they say for the community, we'll put in a hall where we can have meetings. It seems that that's used so many times, but it goes back to them winning what they want. I mean,
so
I'm not sure where the question is in there.
So the
it seems like so many times they say we're going to give so much out, and the town population isn't changed. How many meeting venues do you need? They offer that.
So the comment. So give it to me like in one sentence. So the comment then is stop using meeting space for expansion.
Yeah, it's an expansion. It's the entire.
Okay.
We'll give that to the town people.
Okay. So talk to me about. So talk to me about a community center. Would, like, if it did other things, like.
I thought about that because I saw it up there.
Yep.
And I think about what it serves in terms of food, meals. That brings a different facility possibly.
Okay.
And the library, this hall. So then all of a sudden we now have 10 major projects over time. And I don't mind spending money, but are there going to be another 10 and another 10 behind it? You never see the end of anything, and that's why a master plan has importance. But it's like we just grabbed another 10 projects, and there'll be another 10 beyond that.
So, community center, what should a new community center move forward? What would you like to see in it?
I think it wants to have a combination of purposes and it's intriguing to see that some of the storage, whether that's future use on the development, that it has multiple. It's not just we come in and use it between 8 and 10 on a Tuesday and then trickle here and there, but there may be more combinations of public facilities. This would be a good one. A lot of pressure on it.
Well, one of our comments is we want to continue to encourage is some very good public-private partnerships now, kind of continue to grow that. In this spirit, the community center would be a town facility.
I don't see any mention of the railroad facility. Is that on track, as they say?
So the comment was the model railroad facility, and if some of you don't know, they are interested and have a warrant article out now to take over the warehouse at the railroad station. So that, interesting question. So the question was about the model railroad. Just what's going on with it. So we met with John, who's heading that up. So interesting is that it's a community facility. That building is owned by the town now, but that is a very private group that wants to put that train, and I think it would be a very educational, it's not just a museum or whatever. Like, there'll be a lot of educational value to it. So they are in the process of securing or trying to secure grant money to move forward with it. I believe they've got until 2021, according to the warrant article, to decide whether they're going to move forward or not. So I can't answer where they are. So at this point, that building is just kind of waiting. Yeah, but I know they need to follow very strict historic guidelines on the building.
As far as, like, I know the CIP projects now,
Energy in there, yep. So, yeah.
Okay, folks, believe it or not, it's time for your last table tonight. This should be the 6th table if you'd like to move on. Hopefully everybody has one table that they have not been to, and hopefully it doesn't... Is it the 5th?
So to quickly answer that, this is kind of a blanket
Okay, I'm sorry. Apparently it's the 5th, and I
to
cannot
all.
keep track. So move on to your 5th table, not your 6th table. Thanks, everyone.
We need to have opportunities for more economic growth with year-round employment, such as health service related businesses and educational institutions and other businesses in some areas that we need to develop, that we need to identify that could be development areas. So our goals are up on the list. We had pass-out sheets here because in addition to the goals are a list of recommendations that the committee has come up with. And so we would like your suggestions, folks. Okay. We have written it down because it is hard to hear. I'm having a hard time hearing.
The different groups are egging. Tighter is because it's not the typical town and it doesn't have all the chain stores and big box type stores. I don't want them ever to be here. I just don't. I mean, you can hear it. If we wanted that, there's Columbia, there's Meredith, there's other places, but Hillsborough is unique in that it's more of a quaint, small town, traditional type town, and that's what we like about it.
Okay, so basically it's
No factories, no cheap
quaint town that
dollar
you,
stores.
okay, that you want us to maintain the character that we have now. Is that basically what you're saying? Oh, okay, well, one of the things that we wanted to focus on was making sure that our existing businesses are protected. So that's one of the, right up at the top of the list. And if they're having issues, we want to be able to help them deal with them. I mean, if they want to expand, you know, they should be able to sit down and talk with us and talk about how to do that. So, yeah. Yeah. Yes.
The question is, what is there any study?
Just a second.
Is there study? Is there? How do you find out, like in Wolfboro, who owns the buildings and what's the cost for folks to have a store there? Do you own your own building, or is there? I get a sense there's very few people in Wolfboro that actually own the building.
Okay.
How does that help small businesses come?
I don't know.
that impact economic development? Is there any information about, other than looking at the tax map, as to who owns what? Is it approaching a monopoly of sorts? I'm not trying to make a problem. I'm just asking a question. Because I pick up information and I find out one person owns like an entire block. How does that, is that good or bad? For economic development?
Yeah, I'm not really sure.
many parking spaces
What was the first part of your question? That is just starting through the approval process, and I'm not sure. I mean, there are quite a few parking spaces, but I can't remember how many. Right, and we're talking about constructing a sidewalk up to that.
Okay, everyone, I think I've got it right this time. This is now your last group. If you could please move to the next table for your sixth table whenever you get a chance. Thank you very much.
Yeah, but yeah, right. If you have any questions or comments, yeah, right, and that's going to, I think, encourage more development along that Bay Street area. Yes, right. Yeah, right. Yes, yeah, that's true. Thank you, folks. If you've got any comments, write them down.
Were you writing down things people said?
Thank you. Excuse me, ma'am. Sorry. So if I could...
Called Arts and Heritage, and I have a microphone, and our goal this evening is to get as many additional recommendations and comments on our goals and recommendations, and any critical areas that we haven't hit upon. If you find something that we should really address, we would love to hear comments, and we'd love to discuss with you our current goals and recommendations, and just see what your thoughts are. So one of the first major item that keeps coming up is some kind of coordinated person and place where all of the events in town can be posted and coordinated. So instead of just a collector of information, which we have now in a number of spots, the committee has really felt that it's very important to have somebody that's proactive and helps to get groups to coordinate activities and promote events and just keep everything available, accessible, so that all age groups, all interests can go to one central place and find out what's happening in town, and really to promote it so that there's no overlap, so that the Boat Museum and the Wright Museum aren't doing a big gala on exactly the same time, so that people can see that we're vibrant constantly and it's easy to find activities. So that really has been coming up as our major arts and heritage promotional tool, because we have a lot going on in town. It just seems somewhat fragmented. So this keeps coming up over and over, and it sort of is embedded in every goal and recommendation. We need to get information out, and we need to coordinate things. The second feature, our second goal, is informative. We are putting together a map that shows specific historic sites. We'll also be putting together a list of venues. So let's say artists want to display artwork, or musicians would like to have, jam session. They know where to go. So that is really number 2. And there's also a list that, if anybody is curious about the current list of historic buildings and resources, that'll be specifically noted on that map. The third goal is really common. People keep talking about how Wolfboro is unique. It's quintessential small town New England, and it's essential that we don't ruin it, that we promote it, that any improvements fit in our character, so that our desirability is retained and our soul, I keep hearing, is retained. We don't lose it to some generic town look. We still are special small New England. Our number 4 goal is really about adding life, activity, increasing different seasonal events, promoting things for different age groups, so that we're just more vibrant, essentially. We'd like to make it easier to plan events, to have activities. People have mentioned food trucks and street musicians and things that are happening after dark that are currently not happening. Yeah, and it to see, yeah. And it could easily. And somebody, the last group, said, it's already happening a little bit. The Yum Yum Shop put a lot of chairs out there, and, families come and hang out. And if we had the addition of, like, jugglers or, just some entertainment, people might activate the downtown a little bit more at night. And there's plenty of parking when the shops close, and maybe some of the shops would start staying open. So we could become a little bit more vibrant. Number 5 is about education. And it's not just for children, but it would include school children, but education for everybody. I mean, about our culture, our arts, our history. Talk about perhaps some tours that you could use your iPhone and go around town, and you could say, on this corner, such and such inn was here, and maybe see sort of the ghost tour of the town. Some fun, informational, educational events would be really pretty exciting, and it probably would start small, and then it would gain interest and be kind of interesting. And there are lots of different ideas like that. So education, classes. Again, this sort of goes back to number 1, and there are a lot of artists in town, and there are a lot of people who would be willing to reach out and coordinate things, but there's no place to go to find out either how to participate or when this is happening. So number 6 kind of ties back into number 1, just an events coordination, but to promote sculpture, design, painting. I guess we forgot painting. Somebody mentioned graphic arts. So number 7 is usage of the facilities, basically. The Great Hall specifically. People want to see this building used now that we have it. People have been talking about the movies. Could be arts events. We've got Gala doing great things in here. It's become super popular. We just want to increase the usage, because actually it's the center of downtown. So if we're talking about trying to increase vibrancy, here we are in the middle. Personally, I'd like to see us use the front door more often, so that people will come in off the street and really, just see what's happening upstairs. Yeah, up front. So again, this number 8 is, I think some of these we could probably combine. Number 8, again, it's education and coordination, different age groups. There apparently is quite a bit of grant money and education money in town that the kids don't know is available. And so it's somewhat frustrating to organizations that have this money that the kids aren't taking it. Yeah. So again, that's informative. You know, we need to somehow promote what's available and just coordinate that. And perhaps that job number one, you know, our coordinator and event calendar could be doing that, just that. Okay, so the Historical Society keeps coming up, and it used to have quite a lot of activity, and it seems to have dropped off. They have great events, but there's not a lot of support for it. There's not a lot of knowledge about what's happening down there. So we're trying to establish either a budget or information or something to really help promote the Historical Society that exists, and it functions, and it's a great resource. I don't know if you've ever been in there, but and if you wanted to know about the house that you're living in and it's got any kind of age, they have all sorts of information about who the owners were, what it might have been. It's pretty fascinating, but it's not well known. Number 10 is rehab and reuse of historic structures. What we'd like to do is to help support people like the people who renovated the Pickering House to promote restoration or rehab and try and figure out ways to facilitate it and not complicate it, because sometimes, you know, it's perceived that it's just difficult. Getting federal funding can be difficult. Complying with regulation can be difficult. So we'd like to figure out a way to explore tools and procedures that would help people rehab historic buildings, because the crisis is, if we don't figure that out, we'll lose them. And certainly we don't. We have some beautiful buildings, but it's a challenge. Yeah, back to number 3. Exactly, yeah. So the gateway idea is we have sort of 3 ways into town. One, you start on Route 28. That's actually probably the 3rd way, and you come in via the 7-Eleven past that intersection. That's sort of one gateway. The other gateway is South Wolfboro. You come around the corner at Weston Autovary. That's one gateway. And then as you come over the hill by the cemetery, you kind of come down into town. That's another gateway. So what we'd like to recommend is that it's a street beautification scenario, so that we could coordinate street tree planting, garden club planting, power line discussions, curbs, sidewalks, integrate all of the different elements that make our streets beautiful. So even if we're not promoting, you know, the perfect building, or if we might be at least promoting the beautiful streets. So it leads you into our downtown area. Another element is 4-season activity level. That, you know, is a constant theme. It's a constant theme for the Economic Development Committee, and we'd like to figure out how to really promote arts and culture in the off seasons, and just continue to make it popular. And then again, number 13 kind of loops back to number 1. We'd like to get feedback and figure out, you know, what events were enjoyed, you know, what we should promote more, and just get some kind of a resource, whether it's the website and the calendar or this person who might be the coordinator for all of these things, just to get feedback and give ideas and, you know, a positive loop to promote things. So that's sort of a rundown of what we've got. I'm sure you've got ideas.
As Vaughn said at the beginning, all that enhances the community experience and the visitor experience, and with more visitors, we've got economic vitality. We have all these great things, but they're not well known, they're not easily accessible, and they're not, you know, from both sides, from the person putting on the event to the person going to the event. There's a lot of difficulties, including getting permits.
one thing that I've always thought that Wolfboro should have, we have so many talented people, retirees here with great skills. I would love to see them continue to put those skills to use in something like a volunteer clearinghouse. It kind of goes a little bit beyond the scope of this committee, but I haven't seen another committee that's really dealing with anything like this. If there were a central organization that could tap into the great skills that people have to offer and could do so for free. When I was growing up in Corning, New York, we had a center that was actually devoted to taking, and this was back in the days when many women didn't work, and so they were a wealth of talent, and quite cheap, in fact. But we have another wealth of talent here too. Exactly. I have a different question, and that's back to number 3. How do you envision those architectural standards being enforced, or how would that?
So at the moment, the planning board is working on some standards that would be in site plan review, and it is a process ongoing. And what it is what we used to have is guidelines, a set of guidelines that was a package of information that was given to building applications, people who presented something or wanted to develop on a site.
Okay,
but,
folks, we are actually at the end of the 15
volunteer.
minutes of your
so
last
now we're
table
trying
session.
to get it into site plan regulations
You're
so
free
that if
to
you
stay
come
and
in
talk as much as you'd like.
to
I just want to
modify
thank
a
everybody
building
for
or to
coming
create
tonight.
a new building,
On behalf of the
that
planning
there
board and
are
the
some
subcommittees,
standards
we really
to be met
appreciate
to
your
make the
input.
building fit in
Just a
so
couple
that it
quick
doesn't
housekeeping items before you take off. I wanted to tell
kind
you
of
sort of
blemish
what's next in our
the
process.
downtown
Obviously,
area.
the committees have collected a lot of input tonight. They're going to be reviewing that and potentially
anything
incorporating
that
it into their chapter
requires
drafts.
Site plan
additionally,
review.
we will be working on our future land use chapter in late 2019. That will be a separate subcommittee that's appointed by the planning board. We'll have public hearings for each of the chapters that you heard about tonight, and that will be in 2019 as well when the plan is in its final draft format. If you have any questions or comments for the specific committees and you haven't exchanged contact info, please feel free to reach out to me. My contact information is right here, planning director at wolfboronh.us or 569-5970. I'm Matt Sullivan. Thank you very much. I want to say one quick thing, though. There's an event happening here tomorrow evening at 5:30. Josh Arnold is here from Gala. It's an excellent project going on in the community, and I always love to plug a fantastic community organization. They're actually doing a visioning session for their project that they're planning on Bay Street, and I encourage everyone to attend that meeting if you have time. And again, that's 5:30 tomorrow evening right here. So if you haven't spent enough time here tonight, you can come back tomorrow. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a great night. Really appreciate it. Thank you.